The first few questions are about the site itself.
Right.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what plans you have for your show? Are you thinking about the physical space of the gallery? Are you going to fill the entire? It's quite a large space, shaped in a kind of a cross. And are you working on a particular theme? And are you using any new materials, or you can take it from there?
So I'm doing both,
Mm-hmm.
kind of reacting to the physical space, and then Lori and I had talked about showing some older works as well. So you guys have all of those cases that
Uh-huh.
can be put into the wings of
Right.
the gallery, and I have quite a not a huge number, but quite a few of my older tape pieces um, that I was thinking might be nice to kind of give a little bit of history. So I don't. I mean, as far as the work or the show, kind of reacting to the fact that it's an educational
Mm-hmm.
institution, I thought giving more of a background, and not I wouldn't dare ever say like a retrospective,
Uh-huh.
but just something that gives a little bit of context of
Right.
where I've come from
Uh-huh.
and what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just because of the nature of the hallway being so long and thin, I've been thinking that it might be kind of fun to play with the idea of a timeline,
Uh-huh.
kind of going
Oh,
through the
interesting.
hallway.
Uh-huh.
Um, and Lori will tell you that I was really smitten with the lights that.
In the center, yes.
So a lot of it's still up here. I will admit, hi, new person.
That's Paula, our professor.
Hi. And I just want to show up down in LA, so a lot of my brain has been devoted to that, and I also just started a new teaching position, so I'm coming up with a whole list of excuses as to why I don't have a totally concrete idea about what is going to happen with the lights, but that's not atypical of me. I tend to ruminate for a really long time before I actually put thoughts down to paper. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely planning on working with the lights. Exactly how, I'm not 100% sure right yet. So was there other
Yeah, actually, you
questions?
covered two of my other questions in your answer by saying, because we were asking about, the next two questions were about if you had any plans or drawings or images or notes, and if you could have a look at those for the site-specific works, but you've already covered that a little bit, so I don't think we need to go into that
And once
more.
I do, I'll be happy to share them with
Okay,
you.
that would be wonderful. And of course, we've also covered some of the older works that you've chosen as the tape pieces that you would like to show in the cases. So we've got that covered. Great. So moving on to your process, when you begin working on a piece, do you have a set plan or of an idea that you execute, or are you more experimental? And is it a result from playing with the materials and the process of making and remaking?
Uh, Both. I think definitely when I'm working with a new material, I have to do a lot of playing. Part of my process is when I'm working with the manufactured stuff, the industrial stuff, I'm very interested in subverting the materials and seeing how I can stretch and bend them and make them look not like what they are intended to look like necessarily, or behave in a way that is not that is different from their intended purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the forms emerge as a result of how I'm able to manipulate the materials. And then there are other instances where I'm more purposeful with the form that I want to make. So I've always been drawn to organic forms. It's ever since I started working in art, in sculpture mostly, I've been making organic forms, and so that I always kind of push towards that tendency. So anything that's kind of pod-like, vessel-like, I'm always interested in those shapes.
All right, the next question is, There is an organic quality to your work, which is often referred to as mutations and abnormal growths, which grow smarter and adapt to their environment. This makes reference to the human body, its functions and its dysfunctions, and the organisms that sometimes invade us, both friendly and threatening. Can you elaborate on on this, and then also on notions of disease, death, and decay that figure into your artistic process?
Yeah, I mean, you already just hit on a lot of things, right? I'm totally fascinated with. Um, I think sometimes with my work, people maybe read a little too much into the whole tumor thing. I think that the way that KQED Spark episode was edited, so they filmed like 7 hours with me, and then it gets boiled down into like 7 minutes. And I don't know if that part sounds a little bit juicier or what the deal was, but they definitely concentrated quite heavily on the few times that I brought up cancer, which of course I want people to see those things, but that's not where it begins and ends. So it's a much broader scope, and it's if people read cancer and malignancy into the forms, that's fine, but I'm really coming from a perspective of just living in this world and being in constant wonderment of the way that organisms behave generally, whether that's us or animals or bacterial growth, and how it all coalesces. That I know I'm kind of skipping ahead to some of your other questions. I don't come from a science background. I'm totally fascinated with it, but quite frankly, I just wasn't smart enough to do well in biology courses or anything like that. But it fascinates me to no end. And part of me enjoys having sort of a naive perspective on it. So I feel like I'm not kind of hindered by facts when I'm making the work. I can kind of just delve into this fantasy world of what if. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by natural processes, metamorphosis, birth, death, all of that. And I am really drawn to the kind of scarier side of things as well. So, when I don't know, when bacteria multiply, it's like, how does that even happen? Or when invasive I'm really fascinated with invasive species, or when just like the human tendency to try to control our surroundings, to control nature, and how often that backfires on us. That is a constant feeder for me, because I feel like we still haven't learned, and I feel like a lot of the time the endeavors are altruistic. They're meant for the greater good, but I feel like we can't help ourselves being human beings and kind of taking it a little too far, and then things kind of spiral out of our control. So you can relate that to anything from global climate change to fighting diseases so that we can live longer, but then what's really our quality of life? I mean, I feel like that kind of touches on so many aspects of how we live. Kind of urban density versus sprawl, so all of those things are in the back of my mind when I'm creating these works.
Can I interject?
Sure thing, of course. Please
so I just had a question. So you just had the show in LA. Should we be looking toward that to see the direction you're going, or do you feel like, in terms of materials and subject matter process, or is every show different? Like, do you start on one material and kind of work through it with several shows, or?
I have carried over similar, same pieces and similar installations from show to show. The show in LA right now is a pretty new step for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of not so concerned this time with working with like a crazy material. It was really more about the process of it was kind of an interesting combination of my newer work and then older work, where I'm really going back to the vessel-like forms and going back to a material that's a bit more traditional, if we're talking art speak. So it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I'm still have a whole closet full of weird materials that I'm just dying to do something with. But I also feel really strongly about the new body of work and taking that forward as well. So I kind of like having a few different pots going on, like in terms of I tend to sometimes get a little bit bored with one thing, or I'll just kind of max out on it and I can't really work on it anymore, so I'll have to switch gears and do something else for a little while.
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
Should I? Touching on what we talked about very briefly, the aesthetic qualities of your work, such as delicacy, lightness, and even playfulness, sometimes conceal the deeper impressions of loss, isolation, and danger, and even helplessness. Is this intentional, and what would you like your audiences to take away from the looking experience? Is it primarily visual, or do you want them to make those deeper connections?
First of all, they are very intentional. Very into all of those things that you hit upon. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what you want the viewer to take away, I mean, that's such the ideal of that is such a narrow scope, right? So I think if people look at my work and they are just filled with some level of wonder and curiosity, that's fantastic. But yes, of course, ultimately I'm hoping that people will have a deeper connection with it and maybe make those relations to all the things that we just talked about, or even to, their own personal experiences. I mean, that's sort of like the, supreme example of how I want people to interact with the work, but it's not always going to be true.
Next question is about being a teacher. How does being a teacher influence your practice, and what do you think about the way children look and react to your work, and how would you like to have educate children more about the aspects of your work? And one of our group is very interested in that and was thinking about having like a creativity corner for children to experiment with all the materials that you use. Would that be something that is an idea for you? Or
yeah, I think that's fabulous. So being a teacher, first of all, was something I never intended. I was really, really shy when I was a teenager. I kind of was a social misfit in school, so I went through a lot of my schooling feeling very misunderstood and didn't feel connected with my teachers. So I was kind of bitter about the whole process for a really long time. And then in grad school, I kind of realized that, so many of my fellow grad students was like, oh, you're here because you want to teach someday. Okay, well, maybe I'll try this. And so I taught a two-dimensional design class when I was at Cal State Northridge, not knowing beyond the basics about like color theory, quite seriously. I mean, it was like by the seat of my pants. And I ended up really loving it. And that really surprised me. So I'm a teacher sort of by accident, and I love the process, and I love having students very excited by what they're doing